When Joe Biden was sworn in as president of the United States in 2021, he did what is customary for any incoming president to do. He replaced all the U.S. attorneys in the country and appointed new ones. All that is except two. He kept John Durham. Remember that guy? Durham was allowed to stay on and complete what was essentially a Trump-ordered wild goose chase to bring the deep state to account, a goose chase which came up with basically nothing. And then there was David Weiss. David Weiss is the Delaware U.S. attorney, and he is the man who launched the probe into Hunter Biden in 2018. The new president, Joe Biden, left Weiss there in Delaware so as not to interfere in any way in the ongoing investigation of his own son. Well, today, 5 years after that investigation was first opened up, the president's son, Hunter Biden, reached a plea deal with the Department of Justice. Biden will plead guilty to 2 federal misdemeanor counts of failing to pay his taxes, and he will avoid a felony gun possession charge related to his purchase of a firearm while he was using drugs in 2018. We should note this is very, very, very rarely prosecuted on those terms. Now, a federal judge still needs to approve the agreement, which would result in Hunter Biden serving probation, but most likely no jail time. He's expected to appear in court in the coming days to be arraigned and enter his guilty plea. It's been a remarkable road to get to this point. I mean, the first time the Department of Justice has brought charges against the child of a sitting president. And it appears, from what we know and from the timeline, that federal prosecutors dealt with this case very similarly to their investigation into ex-President Trump, which is to say, at every point, up and down the chain of command, they went out of their way, bending over backwards so as not to appear partisan or biased or unfair. As we just learned from the new reporting in the Washington Post, the FBI resisted investigating Donald Trump for his role on January 6th for more than a year. Quote, a wariness about appearing partisan, institutional caution, and clashes over how much evidence was sufficient to investigate the actions of Trump and those around him all contributed to the slow pace. And this probe of Hunter Biden has dragged on for 5 years. That's a long time. A sweeping investigation involving federal prosecutors, FBI agents, IRS officials. It has resulted in charges that experts say are rarely prosecuted. That gun charge in particular, prohibiting a drug addict from owning a weapon, is rarely used statute that is facing legal challenges, has been used in high-profile cases where the underlying conduct doesn't violate any obvious federal criminal statute. Notably, Weiss did not bring any charges related to Hunter Biden's dealing with foreign entities, following years of accusations from Republicans about his ties to China and Ukraine. And again, presumably they looked at that stuff in the 5 years they were going through it all, right? But of course, Republicans began moving the goalposts almost immediately after this news broke. Donald Trump, Joe Biden's most likely opponent next year, wrote, quote, the corrupt Biden DOJ just cleared up hundreds of years of criminal liability by giving Hunter Biden a mere traffic ticket. Our system is broken. Congressman James Comer of Kentucky pledged to continue the Oversight Committee's investigation into the president and his son, saying, we will not rest until the full extent of President Biden's involvement in the family's schemes are revealed. Now, the right-wing attacks on the Bidens, particularly on Hunter Biden, have generally been in bad faith. I will say there has been some legitimate criticism, particularly of Hunter Biden's work for a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma, an appointment that certainly had the appearance, and to my mind likely substance, of a foreign entity clearly attempting to just purchase access to the then Vice President of the United States or to curry favor. And Hunter Biden obviously should not have accepted that role. But he's made a lot of bad judgment calls over the year. It's not just that one. And I think both Hunter Biden and his father would agree, largely related to his lifelong struggles with drug and alcohol use. And all of the attacks on Hunter Biden are, of course, just a way to hurt his father, obviously. As Peter Baker puts it in the New York Times, after more than a half century in politics, no subject may be more personally painful nor politically problematic for President Biden than his troubled son, Hunter. He is, by all accounts, a gaping wound in his heart, the most sensitive soft spot in his campaign armor. If you watch right-wing media, and I don't know how much you do, they are obsessed with Hunter Biden. They just sort of engage in a kind of ritual humiliation of him, a mainstay of their programming. And it is all, frankly and clearly, an attempt to wage a sort of psychological warfare upon the president. Joe Biden has no control over the actions of his adult son. We all know that. I think the people pressing these ridiculous attacks know that. His sole surviving son, we should note, who he obviously loves deeply. A love that was laid bare in a just profoundly moving leaked voicemail message Biden left for Hunter Biden, his son, while he was in the throes of a bad spell of addiction in 2018. A voicemail the right wing presented as some kind of damaging evidence against them.
It's Dad. I called to tell you I love you. I love you more than the whole world, pal. Can I get some help? I don't know what to do. I know you don't either, but I'm here no matter what you need. No matter what you need, I love you.
I would bet good money that the majority of people that just heard that right now, have heard it, have had someone they loved who is in a similar spot as Hunter Biden, dealing with substance issues, and can relate to that, maybe even admire the way that Joe Biden spoke to his son. Hunter Biden thankfully did get help and credits his family for never giving up on him. I think today's result of the long investigation into Hunter Biden is ultimately good for the rule of law and for justice, even though I think, honestly, they probably went out of their way to charge him. But no one should lose sight of what this was all about, the sheer sadism of an attempt to wield a son's addiction against the father for political purposes. That's what has animated this entire enterprise from the beginning.